So hey guys, welcome to the live Q&A. Feel free to ask anything that's on your mind, more specifically about enlightenment or the practice or spirituality. But yeah, whatever you're feeling. Um, hmm, yeah, Leith says, I never know how to find these Q&A live casts. I keep refreshing like crazy until it magically appears. Okay. Hopefully, you're holding your practice, right? Hold practice, trust in the timing, and it all flows perfectly. So we'll just hang out here and yeah, just ask a question. And well, I guess normally I have questions selected. Oh, there was one yesterday. Let me find that question real quickly. Or you can ask a question. Oh, here. Well, actually, we'll just go with Eileen's. Hi, Eileen. Thank you for your comment question. All right. So she says, I am trying to figure out how best to help others on their own journey to enlightenment. I know to stay in present moment myself and to model, but I have someone in my life that is truly suffering, and I feel I want to help, but I don't want to tell him what to do because it seems to cause suffering for us both. Laughing out loud. Yeah, I hear you on that one. Okay, yeah, big topic, very practical question too. I think we all run into to some degree. Um, and I know for me, when I first got into this, like I had these powerful realizations, and yet really I felt kind of silly, like living in this state of heaven and not sharing it. You know, um, it's like once you get it, the answers feel and they just seem like, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's really quite simple, um, and yet you go into this, you run into this conundrum of like, well, how do you even explain it? Um, Especially with people that you love. I remember like I wanted to help people around me, um, my family, obviously, and friends first. And what you quickly come to learn is that everybody's on their own path. Everybody has their own timing. And when you see someone that you love in suffering, I get it. It's not easy. Um, when you feel like you have answers and you even try to share those answers, yet they aren't really received. Yet, that is actually also part of what is. That is part of the whole grand picture of what is happening. What is this moment? Well, for them, it's them and their suffering and their inability to hear bits of wisdom that are given to them. And that's out of our control. So a big part of this is surrendering, doing our best to share. I do believe like it doesn't hurt to try and share, but when you try and it turns into um, suffering or into arguments, as Eileen kind of hinted at the end there, it seems to cause suffering for both of us. Right? Yeah, and that's often because, like, let's say you see somebody in a pain body. If you try to call that pain body out, it's a very tricky thing to do. It takes a lot of mastery to be able to do so without having any reactivity within ourselves. And um, and that's what's most important. Whenever you're wishing to help someone heal, especially someone specifically, perhaps someone you live with that you're involved with all the time, they have a lot of pain bodies. Um, Really, the most powerful way to heal them is to continuously heal ourselves. So if you feel suffering over their suffering, then heal your suffering again. You know, the important part of this too is like it's not just about having the right words, and it's not even about appearing to be in acceptance and smiling or calm. we also have to really deeply pay attention to how we're feeling in those moments, the underlying levels, the frequency, what is in there, what is within us, deep within. If there's little feelings of irritation, of anger, of disappointment, or sadness, or I don't know, all kinds of stuff, then we need to look at that within ourselves and heal that. More so than trying to tell them the right words. Because if any sort of disturbance is within us when we're interacting with someone that we're hoping to heal, that disturbance is actually going to be embedded within the words that we speak, and the healing can't really be effective. And that's why, so much of this really is about focusing on our own path and our own place of healing. As like a spiritual life coach, I do help a lot of people that are in suffering. If I was attached to the results of them hearing me and getting out of their suffering, I would be in a lot of suffering, and I wouldn't be a very effective coach. Instead, I really just I put it out there. I put it out there with love and with experience. But whether it's received or not is not of my choice. It's not of my control, and it's not of my path. It is of theirs. Each and every person has their path, and you just have to trust that. On a humbling side, oftentimes the part of us that wants to point at somebody else's pain body or ego is our own pain body. We have to be really humbling to ourselves too, and recognize there's little bits of us that are actually like wanting to be superior in helping somebody else out of their suffering, because we are the knower and they are the not knower. We are the teacher and they are the student. Something to be just mindful of, to be careful of, because that can sneak in very subtle ways. Because another big part of this practice is unconditional love. So when you see somebody in suffering, just loving them where they are, not wanting them to be different. Of course, you want them to not be in suffering. Yeah, that's beautiful and compassionate. Buddha Sattva type of perspective. But if that's where they are, that's where they are too. And if you resist where they are, you yourself are now back in the whole resistance game, and you can't really be of service to them because you are resistant. And don't beat yourself up for it. Got to watch that perfectionism. I know we are hard on ourselves, especially when we get a bit more advanced in our practices. We just like, I don't know why, but we get really hard on ourselves when we slip from our practice. So just be aware, bring awareness to it when it's happening. Also recognize this isn't just random. The person you love that's in suffering, this isn't random or accident. This is happening for many reasons, on many levels, part of which is for your own personal development, and then a big part of which is for their own personal development, and then many other aspects, pieces of the puzzle too. So then again, at the end of the day, you share what you can, and you trust that whatever is supposed to be received will be received, and what isn't received just wasn't supposed to be received. And there's also, I'm a big believer in planting seeds. I think any time that you are able to maintain non-reactivity and deeply inside, not just outwardly, not just with the right words, but a deeply inside level of peace, surrender, and acceptance, then we do have this really powerful ability to plant seeds. And those seeds will grow in their own time. Again, that's not for us to decide how long it should take for them to awaken, to experience more enlightenment, or to step more and more out of their own pain bodies and their own egos. That's their path, and we just honor their path. It's a very, very beautiful and common question for all of us, because we get into these teachings and it's just like, wow, this is amazing. You just want to share it, because it's, especially with the ones you love, you just want to share it. But then it's the whole question of, well, how is the most effective way of sharing? And it's a whole other set of challenges and lessons within it to deepen our practices. Because there could be expectation, there could be denial of what is, there could be all kinds of stuff. So yeah. Perhaps too, I've heard from some people that we kind of unknowingly take on a responsibility to heal others. A response, like we, some part of us feels like we're responsible for alleviating other people's suffering, which is kind of it's a tricky trap. Because in truth, every individual is responsible for their own inner state. We can do our best to be helpful, and yet at the same time, we don't need to carry any sort of heaviness of responsibility. Something to sit and just keep doing your best, keep soaking it all in, learning from it. You know, I've learned a lot from my own ego and reactivity, and I've also learned quite a bit from observing other people's pain bodies and reactivity. I've learned tremendous amounts, and if you feel guided to be an enlightened teacher, then you just got to keep learning and learning and learning from every single thing that happens around you, especially those people that are in deep pain bodies or egos, that really learn. All right, so Leith says, speaking of irritation earlier, is it ever okay to act from irritation or anger, even if we're aware of how we're feeling at the time? Or is it always better to watch it, let it go, and then act? Thank you for the question. In my experience, it's always better to pause when we feel any sort of resistance, irritation, anger, especially. Because, ironically, I've noticed that the resistant energy of that sort, it convinces us that it's going to create change. It's going to create positive solutions, or it's going to call something out and it's going to create change that needs to be changed. Um, Ironically, what I've learned, and maybe you have to decide this for yourself, but what I've learned in my life is anytime I have acted from irritation and anger, it has created more problems. it it very seductively convinces us that it will bring solution, and yet in truth, in wisdom, we realize it brings problems. It just inflames situations, creates other situations. Whereas when I slow down, I focus on, as Eckhart says, our primary goal in life is our state of consciousness in this moment. So when your state of consciousness has gone into irritation and anger, it's like a lower level frequency. And it's just, here's another way of looking at it. I know for me, and I'm sure for everybody here, we've all experienced anger. And when you experience anger, intelligence kind of goes out the window. Like common sense, logic can really just, when we're experiencing reactivity, when we're experiencing anger or frustration or impatience, it's unfortunate, but it's like, yeah, intelligence really gets diluted in those intense pains. And consequently, when you lose that intelligence, you lose the solution of positive change. So yeah, I do definitely believe if you want to create a positive change, know from your own experience that while as convincing as that anger and irritation would like to be that it's going to fix something, it's just not true. And what we do know is true that will fix things is the wisdom of peace. It's the intelligence of joy, of acceptance, of surrender, of trust. A Course in Miracles says, correct action arises out of stillness. So if you make stillness your primary objective at all times, then you can always know you're going to act effectively and accurately. And that's just part of the all part of the practice. And it's not always easy, but it's very it's thank you for the question. It's a good question, very practical question. Another way of looking at it is when we are in anger and irritation, we are in a state of reaction. Whereas when we pause, watch it, let it go, that's actually a moment we're responding. There's a whole totally different quality to responding versus reactivity. Reactivity is blinding, it's unpredictable, and it's destructive. Responding is still approaching the situation. It's just coming from an okay, coming from, all right, this is happening. Whereas reactivity is coming from, oh no, this isn't happening. No way, this can't be happening. So we get angry, we get frustration or impatience, and then we create more problems. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Yeah. Yeah, we all need reminders, you know. We all need reminding. It's so much of awakening and enlightenment is just being reminded of these things that we already know deep within. You know, that's what spiritual teachers are, just reminders, alarm clocks, mindfulness bells. That's the whole practice is remembering and remembering to remember. Thank you for the question. Any other questions? When you do find yourself in reactivity, be careful not to react to the reactivity. Yeah, that's just more reactivity. Instead, acknowledge it, respond to it, pause, take some conscious breath, listen to the present moment, feel your inner body, step out of the mind. Anytime you feel anger, irritation, patience, you can know for sure that you have really fallen back into the mind. So you just got to step out of the mind for a minute. No matter how seductive that story is, put it down. It's not as important as peace. Nothing is as important as your inner state of joy. If you believe otherwise, there'll be a lot of suffering. I have about 5 or 10 minutes of clock time left in this Q&A. Feel free to ask another question, or we can just be together. That's beautiful too. Don't feel like you need to ask a question, but if there's one there. Okay, I'll check out your question, Leif. Leif. Yeah, sorry, I actually forgot. I forgot to check these before this Q&A. That would have been wise. Oh yeah, there's lots of questions in here. Okay. When I sit in silence, I can give my emotions 100% of my focus. I can work through them, often smiling, laughing because of them. When I'm not sitting, when I'm talking to others, making dinner, or any other things I might be doing throughout the day, I try to still keep some of my attention pointed inwards. Trouble is that because I can't give 100% of my attention to any emotions that arise, they still have a hold of me in some way, and I find it impossible to not let them affect me. This can lead to me speaking to someone, for example, more harshly than I would like to, or it can lead to me not giving someone the attention that they deserve when they speak to me, etc. I seek to be in a place where I can feel anything that arises in me, and just watch it without judgment, all while giving my full attention to what is happening in my immediate surroundings. At the moment, this feels impossible to me. Do I just keep practicing? Is it enough that I just notice what comes up, even if it still colors my words and actions? Is there something more I can be doing to speed up this process? I feel an incredible urgency to dissolve this conditioning and patience. Ooh, good awareness. Um, so, what's important in this, and it sounds like you realized it at the end here, being present with how we're feeling can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, so to speak. Um, because as you were sharing this, and what was part of you perhaps was feeling a bit confused and impatient, and those were the very emotions to catch in that moment, right? Because they were happening. They were speaking from them, from the confusion, from the feeling like an incredible urgency to dissolve the conditioning, to finally be in full presence. Ironically, full presence would recognize this sense of urgency, which you did. So you are in presence. Yeah. You'll lose it in brief moments when you go into the future of this needs to be done quicker. Ironically, the desire for it to be faster slows it down. The acceptance of the pace that it's at speeds it up. It's a paradox, but it's true. So, as far as to your practical question of, when you're sitting in silence, you can really feel the emotions and be really present with what's going on within you. But then when you go into everyday activities, not so much. That is very normal, and that's actually where we take the deep meditative practice and we learn to apply it to everyday life is enlightenment. So it's not going to happen overnight. you know, you don't. It's I like to kind of think of it like you're learning a very powerful muscle. You're strengthening this muscle, and the mind is saying, "Hey, you learned how to walk. Why can't you run a marathon? Come on, man. Why, like you've been walking for days now. You can't run 24 miles straight without stopping. Like, come on." Which is silly because it's just no. You got to train. You got to practice. You got to strengthen. Um, you can't go from running a mile to running 24 miles. And the practice of living in meditation is like that. It is constant practice, and this presence, this awareness that's aligned with present moment, is very much like a muscle that we have to develop and we have to strengthen and strengthen and strengthen. And the moment you noticed that there is an incredible urgency to dissolve your conditioning and to be more present, you were present. You were doing the very thing that you were wanting to do. It's a beautiful sign. And as far as how do you bring this into daily life, well, that's the gift and the challenge. That is it. Like that's the question of enlightenment is how do I live in it? Well, first off, be grateful that you even know what it tastes like. Okay. And enjoy those moments of seated silence and of going into emotion and transcending. Enjoy that fully. And then you just work with where your practice is. Okay, now how long can I hold this before I lose it? And you start to really pay more attention to how you interact with everyone. Like you said, maybe you're not being as genuine as you would like to be because some part of your brain is in some story that's pissing you off. Or maybe you're not giving your undivided attention to someone you love, child, for example, right? Because some part of your brain is elsewhere. Some part of your attention is in your mind. Don't beat yourself up for this. Notice it and say, make that your daily practice. Notice where you'd like it to have some more effective presence in. Write it down and make that your practice for the week. So for you, this week, the practice is those two things. Noticing when you're speaking not from stillness and peace, but from some feeling of resistance that's diluting your authenticity. And also the quality of your attention, those you would love to have more quality attention for. Very powerful practices. And don't beat yourself up when you slip. The fact that you're even trying is tremendous and it's a gift to everyone around you. So don't feed that thought, that negative criticisms. Do your best and work with where you are, accept where you are, accept where you lose it, and keep on swimming. And it will get better. It will grow. It's not going to happen overnight, but every day is a day of success that you're even trying. And throughout the days, through chronological time, mastery occurs. And that's what path that you're asking is the path of mastery. How can I get to mastery? Well, you don't master the piano in a month or even a year. It just takes a lot of practice. And you don't even realize you have mastery once you have it. That's the irony of things too. I played guitar for years, and like if I went from the day I started to now, I would be like, whoa, I've made a lot of progress. But because it's such a slow process, you kind of feel like you're not making a lot of progress. But if you really stop, look at where you were 10 years ago and recognize that amount of progress. Use that as your motivation to keep going and to feel like, all right, I'm doing good here. I'm actually I'm making a lot of growth rather than only focusing on where you're not, which then just slows you down. Focus on where you are. And it's chop wood, carry water. as the Buddhists say, in, uh, living in meditation. Yeah. Noticing resistance. You're doing the dishes, be with the dishes. Feel what it's like to do the dishes. When you're washing your hands, feel what it's like to wash your hands. Washing your hands in that moment is more important than thinking about whatever story is going on in your head. Stories always convince us that they're so important, and they're not. What's important is this, whatever this looks like for you in this moment, and as it constantly goes out, through your day, each day. Last thing I'll say on the mastery thing. One thing that really helped me was to step back and focus on mastering one day, because I realized life is one day at a time, right? You wake up, you have your day, and you go to sleep. And I realized life is just a repetition of one day. So if I could really learn to master the one day, I would basically have the equation for my whole life, the rest of my life. I mastered that day. So you just focus on today's practice, extending your ability to be in presence, to deepen your quality, and all these beautiful things. And you focus on progress, not perfection, one small step at a time. And in doing this, your days will have more consciousness and less unconsciousness. But don't let the mind put you in this place of like you need to be elsewhere. But you don't. You are where you are supposed to be. And you're heading to where you're supposed to be at the same time. It's all in good timing. I feel like going a little longer, so I'm not going to follow my 30-minute Q&A rule. Know the rules well so you can break them effectively, the Dalai Lama says. I'm going to rate this one. You don't have to stay for the whole thing. So Lakina says, I notice that when I am in presence, thinking is not really matter, but sometimes the mind tries so hard to drag me in. Yeah, it certainly does. And part of the reason the mind has such a strong pull is because its very existence is dependent on being convincing. Its power, its over you, is dependent on being so convincing. If it wasn't convincing, it would have no power. That's exactly how fear works, even. Fear only is heavy and painful because we believe it to be real. And that's just it. When you finally see it, when you finally see illusion as illusion, it loses its power. Fear is illusion. Mind is illusion. Thinking is illusion at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, and especially right now. So look at that feeling in you that says that the mind is so hard, like it's so convincing, it's so strong. Who's believing in that? Who's believing the mind is powerful? That the mind has a say to begin with, that the mind has control. You are giving it that power by believing that belief, by believing that thought, by believing the mind that's saying, you see, the mind is saying that the mind is tricky. The mind is saying that the mind is so good at dragging us in. It's already got us if it's saying that, you see, because you're in the mind. If you're saying, sometimes the mind tries so hard to drag me in. Well, who is saying that? Not presence. The mind is saying. So just notice, oh, you got me again, you trickster. And then you drop it. Silence. Back to silence. The mind is going to have more power in being able to pull us in if some part of ourself is still in it as well. That's something else to look at, is identity. Where is your self? Where is your feeling of you, or the feeling of me? Where is it? If it's in the voice in your head in any way, it's going to be a lot harder to drop, because the very idea of dropping the mind is dropping who you, or even dissolving the mind is dissolving you. Who wants to dissolve themselves? Nobody. Yet at the same time, ironically, there's a really powerful realization in that. Because the you that's afraid to be dissolved is not the real you. The real you can't be dissolved. So any part of you that's afraid of dying is not the real you. It's the false. It's the mind. It's the trick. It's the trickster. The real you isn't subject to death. So there's no reason for fear. But a lot of this too. It's interesting, and I really want to make sure we call out quite a bit. You can say, oh yeah, totally, I get that. Yeah, I agree, on point, or whatever. Or you have the exact same words, the exact same thoughts. But if you're experiencing fear, you still don't quite get it. You don't really get it until the suffering is completely gone. So there is no fear in any sort, because all fear can be derived back to the fear of death, of annihilation, of non-existence. And that's also true with enlightenment. It's like a lot of people get tastes, but they're still fluctuating a lot. And if you claim enlightenment while you're still fluctuating, you kind of prevent yourself from alleviating that fluctuation. But instead of saying, I am enlightened, you say, I am on the path of enlightenment, which gives room for the fact that you're fluctuating. And it acknowledges the fact that while you're fluctuating, you would still kind of like to not fluctuate as much. You'd like to be a little bit less in the peace, anger, joy, fear, happiness, depression, or whatever. You know what I mean? So you do have to also be careful not to just claim enlightenment when you're not really there, and in the sense of 24/7 peace, 24/7. Or I like to think maybe not 24/7, but somewhere in like the 90 percentile range, if we had to put a percentage on it. 95 percentile of just constant peace and joy. No judgments, no anger, no fear, no sadness, no doubt. If there is that stuff, okay, no problem. Don't claim enlightenment, or you're going to stop learning. You're going to stop growing. It's like if we claim the end result before we're actually at the end, the mind has succeeded in stopping us from going deeper into its own destruction. That's what it wants. The mind doesn't want you to go into enlightenment. The false self doesn't want you to go into awakening. So it's going to do all kinds of little games to distract, to pull you away, to convince you that you're enlightened when in truth you are not, because you are still suffering. I don't know, I just hear a lot in different spiritual groups and stuff. A lot of people like to answer questions. People will ask questions and from a very vulnerable state, and then everyone will chime in with answers. But honestly, it's like, guys, if you haven't found mastery and experience enlightenment in a very regular level, perhaps you shouldn't be answering the questions. You should be listening for the answers to the few people that have actually living the answers. Because when everyone answers, even when they're coming from a place of non-mastery, it fills the comments And then you have to go through all this discernment of like, well, who is actually speaking from real experience and who's speaking from conceptual understanding while in the midst of a lot of their own suffering. It's a tricky paradox, you know. I see it a lot in different spiritual groups. Gotten into conversations with people that, you know, I find it really interesting when people are like, they almost create arguments over what enlightenment is. Yeah, they're trying to like tell me, you know, as they are the teacher, what enlightenment is, which I'm fine. I listen, I go with it, but at the same time, there's this aggressive energy, and there's this sort of like you're wrong, I'm right type of thing. Like I obviously see they don't really get it because they're in reactivity, but I don't want to make them wrong. But it's just like it's a it's a trap. It's a big trap when you start to get into spirituality to identify with it to a point of thinking that you were always the teacher and that you know and so many other people are actually just your students. If you haven't found complete mastery of your practice, you are still a student. So many ways. Uh, and I mean, even though I have found mastery, I am still a student. That's the thing. I will always be a student for life. I'm not necessarily a student to a lot of the random comments that people answer because they're not coming from a sincere place of experience. They're coming from conceptual understanding. So it doesn't really vibe for me. But ironically, generally, the people that can decipher who's actually coming from direct experience and who isn't are the ones in the direct experience, which is also why it creates so much chaos for everybody on the paths because you're having answers coming from left and right, and they're speaking from their level, but their level isn't the level that you really want to be on. And it creates a lot of confusion, a lot of misguidance, a lot of misinterpretation. I mean, this has been happening for hundreds of thousands of years in religion, right? People thinking I'm the messenger of God, you know, and I'm going to tell you what God means. Meanwhile, it's actually coming from their ego and from their actual lack of experience of the very truth that they're sharing. And so they unintentionally, most of the time, I believe, pass down misinterpretations that end up just slowing people down on their own paths of awakening. So as for you, you have to also be really careful about whose interpretations you are trusting. And how you discern that is largely based on how much you believe they actually live it. Just having the right words is 5% of the real truth. Living it, that's the truth. Yeah. So, you know, it's something I feel important to really call out more. Uh, and at the same time, however, if anyone does share something and they aren't coming from direct enlightened experience, but they're coming from conceptual, oh, I know the answer, even though I suffer in traffic or I suffer here and there and everywhere else. Well, okay, it is what it is. I'm not going to suffer over it. Suffer over it. I've lost the practice. What's the point? um, but out of compassion for those that are really lost, really confused, you know, and sincerely looking for answers, and then you have so many people jumping in trying to answer when they really shouldn't be, or when they're really not ready to be answering because they're not in mastery, is something to look at, something to notice, something to call out, and to be mindful of ourselves. Now, for you, if you're wishing to answer a question, you want to decide whether it's really coming from a genuine place or maybe some bit of ego, is notice how you're feeling when you're responding. Really pay attention to how you're feeling in that moment. Oh, what if a person has depression and anxiety at the same time? Well, then that person is identified with their mind. the voice in their head, with the stories that are justifying the existence of the depression and of the anxiety. Without, without the mind, without the story, depression can't exist. Anxiety, fear, any form of suffering can't exist in pure presence of silence, silent mind. Something really interesting about like depression and anxiety, for example, though, when someone's experiencing it and they feel like really trapped in it, it generally means there's some sense of self. There's an identity in those labels, in that experience, in that feeling. There's some part of us that's actually holding on to it, that is scared to let that depression and let that negativity go, because then it's like, who am I? Who am I without this depression? Who am I without this anxiety that I've been holding on to for so long, so much of my life? And that fear and discomfort of not knowing who you are can prevent you from the freedom of the suffering. And in other words, something I had to catch in myself was there was a part of me that actually enjoyed my pain. It enjoyed the drama. It fed on it. It liked it. It liked the anger. It liked the adrenaline, the the victim. And I had to call that out and go, wait, this is not sanity. Nobody would choose, like, nobody really likes pain. Nobody would choose to create pain. That is coming from an insane place in me. So I had to recognize that some part of me was addicted to the pain. It gave me a sense of self, even though it was a painful one. It was better than nothing, is what my mind said. In truth, nothing is better than pain. And actually, nothing is freedom. But Lakina says, I'm willing to let them go, meaning the depression and anxiety. I have tried so hard to pull myself back, but once in a while it would come out of the blue. Okay? Well, when it comes, honor it. Yeah? Just notice it. Going, oh, here's another little piece of my false identity that it's time to let go of, time to get. So, in other words, whenever it shows back up out of the blue, it's opportunity for more healing, for more and more healing, more getting to the truth of who you are. So it only has power and heaviness when when you fall into a victim of it. Like, oh, the depression's back. Oh, oh, oh. Then you've given it power because you believed it to be true. Whereas when it's there and you're like, okay, here it is. Here's that heavy cloud. All right, this is an opportunity here. This is an opportunity for me to let go of another big piece of this, another chunk of this unhealthiness in me. And you honor it, you allow it to be there, be with it. Resisting it is only going to strengthen it. Yeah. If you when you feel that little feeling of it sneaking back in, of anxiety and depression sneaking back in, how you respond to noticing that it's there is very important in determining if it stays or if it immediately gets dropped. Now, the goal here is to just drop it immediately. Notice, oh yeah, depression, Oh yeah, anxiety. Okay, that's mind. That's false self. That's ego. I know that's not me. And then drop it. But if you can't drop it because you're resisting it, resistance is actually also a fundamental belief that it's real, right? You can't. You're only resisting something if you think it's real. So if you're resisting it, there's some fundamental belief that it has power. It's real in the first place. Or you can see it and recognize it as an illusion of the mind, of the story self, of the blah 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 voice in the head, and 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 just laugh at it, not take it seriously, yeah, or go, nope, not today, and then just drop it. But I get at the same time it's not fair to say just drop it when that doesn't make sense. However, that is also the answer at the end of the day. So just keep going, keep bringing awareness in, keep noticing what stories are pulling you into these clouds and drop those stories. Um, Rod one says hello. What do you think about Osho quotes? These are the knowledge is a curse ride of saying how. Um, I mean, I've heard some of Osho's stuff. I think he has some good points of wisdom. I know there's bits of controversy behind him as well. I still think he has some wisdom, though. I don't think you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think things are way more complex than that. I'm not quite familiar with that quote of the knowledge is a curse, right? Of saying how. But yeah, knowledge certainly can be a curse. Because when you know, you have no room for learning. That's why it's so important to admit that you don't know. You maybe have spent years studying spirituality and enlightenment. Maybe you've had really powerful tastes of awakening. But if you believe you know and yet you're still suffering, then you're in a bit of illusion because you don't really know until you're in freedom. Then you can say you actually know. But when you're experiencing the things you think you know. Oh, and then Lakina says, but the pain is so real to call it an illusion. Ooh, good. Yeah, the illusion doesn't like being called illusion. The pain doesn't like being called illusion. I remember feeling that too when I first heard it. It's just like, how dare you? How could you just take all the wind out of this thing? But that's actually the key to getting out of it, to really recognizing it is illusion. It is completely mind-made story. It, it's illusion because what is not illusion? This moment. What is in front of you right now? It's not illusion. In this not illusion present moment, where is the depression? Where is the anxiety? Literally, where is it? It's not here. It's never here. Never has been here. Same with fear. Fear is not here. There is nothing happening in my present moment that I should experience any sort of fear. But we fall in suffering because while we're sitting in this peaceful, beautiful moment, we're in our heads, which is like the movie maker, the illusion. Yes, yes, the pain is inside. The pain is coming from the story maker of your head, not from the real. Now, at the same time, there is a bit of a paradox here because we don't want to Like when there's pain, we don't want to just swipe it under the rug. Pretend like it's not there. That's not the answer either. Then you're in denial, um, or you fall into escapism and distraction because the discomfort is too uncomfortable and you just can't bear it. So you distract yourself, change the channel, so to speak. you know, uh, go find a interesting book or game or even spiritual teacher to distract you from being with that pain. But when you really, really bring your presence into the pain, there is a place where you can recognize it as illusion. It's not truth. And the fact that we believe it is truth, but we disagree with it being illusion, was the only reason it exists in us. That's its like main thread. But this is something that it may kind of click right now, but at the same time, it's still kind of like I don't know. I don't know if I completely agree with that. But the more you're present with it, the more you recognize where it's really coming from. That it's coming from story in your mind, from thoughts, from imagination, which past, for example, things of our past, pain, it doesn't exist right now. It doesn't. The only way anything of our past can exist is if we use our imagination to recreate it. So if you put the imagination down, you put the past down, you stop recreating it. Stop recreating the suffering that does not need to be re-experienced over and over and over again. It's like we're like torturing ourselves when we're replaying these deep stories embedded in us, without just bringing forgiveness and releasing them. We're torturing ourselves and then we're complaining about life being the torturer. Painful irony. No, life is not torturing you. You are torturing yourself by believing that this illusion is real. Life doesn't want you to be suffering. Life wants you to learn, to grow, to evolve. Life doesn't want you to be suffering. Terry says, when clouds come, irritation, frustration, anger, resistance, first, I am grateful to be aware. Because you know that cloud is there, or you're in it. Yes, good. So you're aware. And she's grateful. Then I lay low, hunker down, be still, and trust that this too shall pass. Very, very powerful reminder. Thank you, Terry. This too shall pass. I am also finding the time I need for it to pass gets shorter. That's the beautiful gift / irony of it. When you're willing to really be with it and allow it to be there, not resist it, not want to just destroy it or burn it or whatever, but when you can just allow it to be there and honor it, it's there for a lot less time. It's wildly ironic, but it's true. And that this too shall pass can be a really powerful anchor. Now, so this is something I highly recommend for anyone that's going in deep levels of unconsciousness moments into the heavy clouds. Decide before you find yourself in a cloud, what is your anchor? Maybe it's conscious breathing, maybe it's the inner body, maybe it's a mantra, or even the words, this too shall pass. But figure out whatever really resonates for you and hold on to it for dear life when you find yourself in a cloud. And the more you do that, the more you strengthen your actual presence to the point where the clouds, you can finally see the clouds, as just an illusion of mist and light and light and water. And you don't even get pulled into them anymore. But to get to the point of not getting into them at all, is first learning how to be in them. So find your anchors. Use meditation techniques that I share every week are various anchors. For me, especially early on, I think one of my fundamental ones when I was in a heavy cloud is conscious breathing. That worked for me the best. I would just be like, okay, hold on. You feel like that. And then, okay, breathe, Ryan, breathe. Focus on the breath, because these anchors are about putting the mind down. When you find yourself in the cloud, you can know you are in the mind. You've fallen back into the mind in a blind way. So you need priority, step out of the mind. That's your priority. You do so by using your anchors, conscious breathing. Focus all of your attention on the breath. Take it away from that story. Take it away from whatever's happening in your head. Listen to the breath. The breath is more important. Okay. And then the spaciousness comes in. The feeling of nothing is all that serious finally comes in. And with that, you can maybe feel and see the cloud from a totally fresh, powerful perspective. And that's when you'll really get like, okay, yeah, that isn't illusion. I see it. I see you. I see you as like a movie. You know, when you watch a movie, it has like, we have these emotional experiences because in that moment we're like believing the movie is really happening. And yet, in truth, some part of us also knows those are just actors. Nobody's really dying in the movie. But in the movie, we're experiencing sadness and anger when people die and all these things in the actual movies. Yeah. But we can remind ourselves that in a lot of ways, the suffering that we experience is just like a movie that's happening. It has a purpose. It has a lot of valuable things to teach us. But in truth, it is filled with actors and actresses and plots. You know, it's not real. And good night, Lakina. She's in Cambodia, so she's across the world, and it's pretty late over there right now. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy. Keep doing your practice. Keep making your breads. I've been noticing you've been making a lot of bread lately. And thank you for your question. Cheers. I think I'm feeling one more question. If anybody has a last question, I'll do that. Yes, thank you, Lakina. I would appreciate that. If we could just figure out how to teleport things, that would be I actually do believe in time, as each of us awakens more, grows more, deepens ourselves more, and the collective itself starts to awaken on a higher level, we will actually tap into things that right now we might consider sci-fi, things that might seem to be kind of breaking the rules of physics, and things we believe to be concrete truth. So who knows? You know, in the future, perhaps we will be able to just send each other food across the world. Sometimes I do actually feel like I can read people's minds. You know, in India, they call them cities, cities, like superpowers, kind of, that you can kind of tap into. I think we all kind of experience them in different degrees too, different levels of intuition. My sister is like very intuitional, like with sort of like the oracle type of thing too, being able to kind of see the future, and predict things that so often actually happen. Which I think is really kind of a fun, different thing to look at with spirituality too, is playing with um, sort of supernatural powers without getting lost in them. They are not the main point, but it's like a fun extra thing on the side. If you make it the main point, probably not going to even really get to it because you're striving way too much. But yeah, just a fun side note. I do believe in infinite possibility, and to that level, these things that we believe to be ultimate truth, I think they're more flexible than we realize, like gravity, even aging. But all in perfect timing. Oh yeah. Leif says, my son is great at that. I can be 3 rooms away, doors closed, opening a bar of chocolate with great care. He'll come bounding in wondering what I'm doing. Oh, I love that. Yeah, so true. And we probably all done that to various degrees too. Or like, like when you thinking of someone and then they just pop up, they call you or text you, or you just see them live in a video. um, I don't believe in coincidence for sure. I think, and I do think it's kind of hinting at that we do have an interconnectedness on levels that aren't even measured yet by the science world. Yeah, that's cool. My dad used to actually share like my grandmother, my dad's side is very like spiritual and very open minded and really cool. Uh, but she and him, he would like get lost in the grocery store, and she would tell him like, just turn on your antenna, and then he would like basically saying like tap into your intuition, listen to your heart, and and then he would find her, and he would never really lose her because he just somehow knew where she was at all times. And there's something in that, there is, I think there is something really powerful in that, especially I'm sure like between a child and a parent, the love is so strong that we can tap into really special and powerful things. I think love is one of the specific frequencies that allows us to go way deeper in possibility, like that connectedness of um, part of my practice, because I believe as far as like the concept of God, to me, God is love. Whatever you wish to call love, whatever name you wish to give it, fine. But if it's of that love quality, then it is of the divine power that I believe in. And in that, making it more practical, I looked at, what do I love most in my life? Where is the deepest expression of God in my life? And I realized my child is one of the deepest levels of love that I have, that I know of, that exists in myself. So then I decided to try, and as much as I love my daughter, see if I could love everyone else at that same level. My friends, my family, of course, but even more so, everyone. Um, Ramana Maharshi has this beautiful quote. Somebody asks him, how are we to treat others? And Ramana replies, there are no others. This idea that we love our family and our friends more than other people is a bit of an illusion. Everyone is family. Everyone is friend. The idea that your bloodline is where you're supposed to love is an illusion. Everyone is your bloodline. Not even just human. all forms of life. Something to really powerfully sit with. Because as human culture, it's like, I think in a lot of ways, we're all recognizing love is definitely important. And we look out for the ones we love, however that looks. For a lot of people in the peaceful side of things, it's like you love your friends, your family, your close ones, people you trust. Um, and it doesn't extend to much more than that. And then for some, like people in violent groups, like in gangs, well, they're looking out for the people they love, people they trust. They're doing the same thing, just in a more aggressive and violent way, but there's still a love there. And same with countries, same with religions, same with these like really aggressive different little groups that are creating drama and havoc on both sides of any equation. Somehow, like within them, there is still some kind of idea of love, what they believe in, what they're passionate about, what they're what gives them some type of purpose in life. I think if we can all slow down and really focus on the source of what's important to us, which is the love, then we can find a lot more commonality and get rid of these little games of separation. Like racism. Racism only exists if you believe we're separate. Any sort of prejudice, any sort of idea that someone else can be different than someone else. Prejudice, judgment, it's a separation, it's a dilution of love. Because the deepest level of love is a genuine recognition of oneness. And you might have a nice fancy belief in that mentally, but then if you fear people around you, you don't quite get it. If you believe that one person over there is wrong and the other person is right, and you don't quite get it. Love goes way deeper than that, way deeper than right and wrong, way deeper than the physical actions that anybody can take. Something to sit with. Where can you extend, even deepen your experience of love? Where is your experience of love, first off? Who do you love most in this planet? And then maybe can you find that same depth of love for every single being, not just the ones that are in your story, but all the stories, including the animals, plants, even the microorganisms. Well, that's a level. I don't know if I'm quite at the microorganism level. that's a deep one. But I do actually have a love for all humans and animals. Deep love. Which is also a part of the reason I don't experience suffering. There's an intimate connection to being enlightened and being in this constant state of love, of connectedness, of oneness. So follow your love. Go deeper into your love. All right. Well, I think my doggies are saying it's time. It's time for me to end this Q&A. So thank you guys for being here. Of course, I love each of you. Keep enjoying your journey that you're on, that you've been on. You've been on this journey for a long time. We're just crossing paths in a nice way. And I'm grateful to have crossed paths with each of you. Thank you. And enjoy your path to enlightenment.